History Zone, where the past comes alive.
I was 32 years old when I chose the trail that would nearly kill me. In the spring of 1846, I believed in maps more than men, and shortcuts more than caution. I believed the words faster, shorter, easier. Most of all, I believed that America rewarded those brave enough to push west before winter dared to follow. My name is Elias Reed, and I was part of the wagon train that history would later whisper about with fear, the Donner Party. At the time, we didn't know we were riding toward legend or death. We thought we were riding toward California sunshine. The trailhead was crowded with hope. Families shook hands, oxen snorted in the dust, children laughed between wagon wheels. The prairie stretched wide and forgiving. The sky looked like it would never close. That was the lie. At Fort Bridger, a man named Lansford Hastings offered us a shortcut. He called it the Hastings Cutoff, claimed it would shave weeks off our journey, less desert, less mountain, more time before snow. Some doubted him. Others, like me, leaned in. I had buried my wife 2 winters earlier. Cholera, the kind of death that steals breath before goodbyes. California felt like a second life waiting for me. I wanted it badly enough to ignore the ache in my gut. We voted. That vote sealed our fate. The cutoff was not a road, it was a wound torn through wilderness. We hacked wagons through rock and thorn, dragged them through salt flats that cracked like bone. Water vanished, oxen collapsed, days turned into arguments, arguments turned into silence. By the time we reached the Sierra Nevada, we were already bleeding time. The mountains rose like a wall of teeth. Snow came early, October snow, thick, unforgiving, silent. I remember the first storm clearly, how the flakes fell slow, almost beautiful, how children reached out their hands, how adults smiled, pretending this was nothing. By the second storm, smiles were gone. Snow buried the trail. Wagons sank axle deep. We abandoned them one by one, like shedding parts of our former selves. Each wagon left behind was a confession. We misjudged this land. Then the third storm came. It did not stop. We tried to push forward. The mountains refused us. Drifts rose taller than men. Paths vanished overnight. The cold ate through wool and skin alike. Fingers cracked, lips bled. We turned back. That decision, turning back, was the moment survival became imprisonment. We built crude cabins near a frozen lake, logs stacked poorly, roofs sagging under snow. Smoke struggled upward like a dying prayer. Food ran out faster than hope. We rationed carefully at first, then desperately, then dishonestly. Cattle died, dogs disappeared, mice became meals. At night, the wind howled like it knew our names. I slept with hunger curled inside me like a living thing. Every dream was of bread, warm, whole, untouched by frost. Children cried less as days passed, not because they were stronger, but because they were weaker. The snow outside our cabin never stopped falling. It pressed against the walls like a judgment. We were trapped, and winter had only just begun.
Hunger
is not just an empty stomach. That was the first lie I had believed. After 2 weeks trapped in snow, hunger became a presence, something that sat beside me, breathed with me, whispered when the cabin fell quiet. It spoke in images, sizzling fat, steaming bread, the sound of teeth tearing into meat. It spoke louder at night. The snow outside our cabin had risen past the windows. We stopped measuring time by days and began measuring it by meals, or the absence of them. Each morning we gathered to divide what little remained. A scrap of hide boiled until it turned gray. A spoonful of flour stretched into a thin paste. We chewed slowly, pretending it mattered. I watched strong men grow smaller, cheeks hollowed, eyes sunk deep like they were retreating inward. Even voices changed, softer, careful, as if speaking too loudly wasted energy we could not afford. Children were the hardest to watch. Little Samuel Donner, once loud enough to wake the whole camp, now barely spoke. He sat wrapped in blankets, staring at nothing. His mother sang to him in a voice that cracked with every note. When she finished, the silence hurt more than the cold. Outside, the snow swallowed everything. Trees bent under its weight like old men kneeling. The lake froze so solid it looked like stone. No birds, no movement, just white, endless and merciless. We tried to hunt. A group of us strapped on makeshift snowshoes and pushed into the forest. Every step sank, every breath burned. The woods felt wrong, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. We found nothing. No deer, no rabbit tracks, not even birds. Winter had stripped the mountains clean. On the way back, Charles Stanton collapsed, just sat down in the snow and stared ahead, eyes unfocused. It took 3 of us to drag him home. When we laid him by the fire, his hands were blue. He never fully warmed again. That night, a terrible conversation began, one spoken in glances and half-finished sentences. No one said the words outright, but they hung in the air, heavier than smoke. What do we do when nothing is left? The next morning, one of the oxen that had survived the desert finally gave out. It fell near the cabins, legs buckling beneath it. No one moved at first. Then someone whispered, "Meat." We butchered it in silence. The flesh was tough, stringy, barely enough for all of us, but it was food, real food. We boiled it, roasted scraps over the fire. For the first time in weeks, bellies felt warm. That night, I slept without dreaming of bread. But the ox only lasted days. Then came the dogs. I will not pretend otherwise. I told myself they were animals, that survival demanded choices, that civilization was far away, buried under snow and distance. Still, when the last dog disappeared, something inside me broke quietly. The snowstorms returned with a fury I had never known. Wind screamed through cracks in the cabins, carrying ice that stung the skin. Roofs sagged, fires struggled to stay alive. We burned wagon boards, chairs, handles of tools. Anything that could burn did. People began to weaken faster now. Some stopped rising from their blankets. Others stared too long at the fire, as if it was speaking back. Then, Mrs. Murphy died. She went quietly in the night. No scream, no struggle, just a breath that never came back. We wrapped her in a blanket and carried her outside. The ground was too frozen to dig. We placed her beneath the snow, marking the spot with a broken oar. As we stood there, snow falling on her shroud, a thought crept into my mind, uninvited and horrifying. She will not feel cold again. I hated myself for thinking it. Days passed, another death, then another, and with each one, the unspoken thought grew louder. One night, I woke to quiet voices, too careful, too controlled. I listened from my blanket, heart pounding. Someone said, "If we don't, we all die." No one argued. I did not speak. I did not move. I lay there staring at the cabin roof, watching frost form and melt with each breath. In the morning, the bodies were gone. The fire burned brighter. The stew smelled different. I did not eat that day. But hunger has patience, and winter only begun to collect its due.
I lasted 3 days without eating. 3 days listening to my stomach twist and claw. 3 nights watching others grow stronger while I shrank into myself. The fire crackled, the stew simmered, and the smell, God help me, the smell followed me everywhere. On the 4th morning, my hands shook so badly I could not hold my cup. Hunger does something strange to the mind. It doesn't rush you, it reasons with you. It reminds you that you are flesh, that morality is a luxury of the fed. I told myself I would eat only to survive, just enough, no more. When the bowl was placed in my hands, I did not ask questions. I ate. The taste is not something I will describe. Some memories deserve to stay buried. I will only say this: once the body accepts what the mind rejects, the battle is already lost. After that, time blurred. Days collapsed into each other, marked only by storms and funerals. We stopped counting the dead. Counting made it real. Snow buried the cabins nearly to their roofs. We dug tunnels just to breathe, just to step outside and remind ourselves the world still existed beyond these walls of white. People changed. Those who ate grew quieter but stronger. Those who refused grew weaker, then vanished. We told ourselves they wandered off. We knew better. The children asked fewer questions now. Hunger ages the young faster than time ever could. They watched us with eyes too old for their faces. One night, Patrick Breen gathered us by the fire. His voice was hoarse, his beard rhymed with frost. "We can't wait for rescue," he said. "If we do, no one leaves this place alive." A plan formed, desperate, thin as hope itself. A group would try to cross the mountains on foot, shansus made from oxbows and rawhide, packs light enough to move. The rest would stay behind and pray. They called it the forlorn hope. I volunteered, not because I was brave, but because I knew if I stayed, I would not survive another month. The mountains might kill me, but staying would certainly finish the job. We left at dawn. 15 of us stepped into the white silence, backs bent beneath crude packs. The wind erased our footprints within minutes, as if the mountain wished to forget we had ever tried. Each step was agony. Snow swallowed us to the waist. Cold gnawed at fingers and toes until pain turned into numbness, then terror. On the second day, a storm hit so suddenly it felt planned. Wind knocked us down. Snow blinded us. We huddled together beneath a rock outcrop, shivering like animals. By the 3rd day, food was gone. By the 4th, strength was failing. One man, Antonio,
collapsed and did not rise again. We waited. We shook him. His eyes stared past us. No one spoke. That night, the decision was made without words. I turned my face away when it happened. The wind carried sounds I will never forget. I pressed my hands over my ears like a child. By morning, we moved again. Survival had become mechanical. Step, breathe, chew, swallow. Thought was dangerous. Thought led to madness. One by one, we lost people. Some to cold, some to exhaustion, some to choices too heavy to carry any further. I felt myself hollowing out, not just my body, but something deeper. Each day I walked farther from the man I had been on the plains, laughing beside a wagon, dreaming of orchards and warm sunlight. At night, I dreamed of snow falling inside my chest. After weeks that felt like years, we descended into lower country. Trees thinned, the snow softened, water ran free beneath the ice. Then, one morning, we saw smoke. A cabin. Civilization. I fell to my knees and wept, not from joy, but from something closer to grief, for those behind us, for what we had become. Help came slowly after that. Messengers, supplies, men brave enough or foolish enough to climb back into the mountains. When rescuers finally reached the cabins by the frozen lake, they found ghosts instead of people. Those who survived were barely human, and winter still had not finished with us.
When I returned to the mountains with the rescue party, I did not recognize the trail. The Sierra Nevada had erased it. Snow lay piled like a burial shroud over everything. Wagons, camps, dreams. We moved slowly, cutting steps into ice, hauling supplies on our backs. Each mile felt heavier than the last, not from the climb, but from knowing what waited ahead. I told the rescuers what to expect. They did not believe me. No one ever does until they see it themselves. The first cabin appeared like a wound in the snow. Its roof had collapsed inward, crushed under winter's weight. Smoke did not rise. Silence hung thick, unnatural. We called out. No answer. Inside, we found 2 survivors. They stared at us as if we were visions, faces sunken, lips cracked, eyes too large for their skulls. One tried to stand and fell. The other laughed, then cried, then fell silent. They had been rationing ashes. As we moved from cabin to cabin, the truth revealed itself piece by piece. Bodies wrapped in blankets, bones stacked carefully near hearths, pots scraped clean of anything that once had meaning. The rescuers turned away, some vomiting into the snow. Others prayed aloud. A few simply stared, frozen, not from cold, but from understanding. We carried out those who could still move. Children first, then women, then whoever remained conscious. We could not take everyone. That was the cruelest rule. Some begged to be taken. Some refused to leave the dead behind. Some did not wake at all. A woman clutched my coat and whispered my name. I did not recognize her at first. Then I did. Margaret Reed. Her hair had gone white. Her voice sounded older than her years. "You made it," she said. I could not answer. We left supplies behind, food, blankets, promises, and descended again. Storms chased us the whole way down, as if the mountain resented giving anything back.
More rescue parties followed. Each one returned with fewer survivors and heavier silence. By spring, the snow finally loosened its grip. What it revealed was worse. The nation learned our story in fragments, whispers first, then headlines. They spoke of cannibalism with horror. They judged from warm rooms, full tables, clean hands. Let them judge. They did not hear the wind screaming through the cabins at night. They did not watch children starve. They did not feel hunger speak in their bones. I carry the mountain with me still. Sometimes in the quiet before sleep, I hear the snow falling again, soft, endless, unforgiving. I see the faces of those who never walked out. California was beautiful when I finally reached it. Golden hills, warm rain, green valleys. But no land is worth what we paid. The Donner Trail is quiet now. Travelers pass without knowing how close they walk to ghosts. I know, and I will never forget.
I thought survival would feel like victory. That was another lie. When I finally reached California, the world looked wrong. Too colorful, too alive. Grass bent in warm wind. Birds sang without fear. People complained about small things, and I wanted to shout at them for wasting breath. My body healed faster than my mind. The frostbite scars faded to pale reminders. My strength returned slowly. Food became plentiful again, almost obscene in its abundance. Bread no longer appeared only in dreams. It sat openly on tables, untouched, taken for granted. Yet every time I ate, I remembered. Survival does not end when danger does. It follows you. It settles in your chest and refuses to leave. At night, I woke gasping, certain the snow had returned, certain the cabin walls were closing in. I slept with a knife beside my bed, even in the safety of towns, where winter meant rain, not death. People asked questions. Some asked with curiosity, others with hunger for horror. A few asked with judgment already fixed in their eyes. "Is it true?" they would say. "Did you really?" I never finished their sentences. I learned quickly that no explanation satisfied anyone. If I spoke honestly, they recoiled. If I softened the truth, they accused me of lying. So I stopped talking. But silence has its own cost. I avoided mirrors for a long time. The man looking back felt unfamiliar, older than his years, eyes carrying something heavy and permanent. I had walked out of the Sierra Nevada, but part of me was still buried there, under layers of snow and memory. Guilt is a patient thing. It waited for me in quiet moments, when laughter faded, when food sat cooling on my plate, when I heard the wind rise at night. It asked questions no one else dared to ask. Why did you live when others didn't? What did you trade to survive? I had no answers that brought peace. Sometimes I dreamed of the trail before the storms, the wagons rolling west, the optimism, the belief that determination alone could conquer land older and stronger than us all. In those dreams, I tried to shout warnings, but my voice never carried far enough. I woke with my throat aching. The newspapers eventually moved on. New tragedies replaced ours. The Donner name became shorthand for horror, stripped of faces and voices. They remembered the worst part and forgot the rest. The courage, the endurance, the terrible love parents showed their children in impossible choices.
I remembered everything. Years passed. I built a life because survival demands continuation. I worked. I married again. I learned how to smile without effort. On the surface, I became ordinary, but the mountains changed me forever. I became cautious to the point of obsession. I watched the sky constantly. I distrusted shortcuts. I respected winter like a living enemy, not a season. When people spoke of the West as something to be conquered, I felt a quiet anger rise. Land does not care about ambition. It does not bend to hope or greed. It simply waits. Sometimes travelers asked me about trails through the Sierra Nevada. I told them the safest routes. I warned them about timing. I told them to turn back early if the snow threatened. A few listened. Some did not. I never returned to the Donner Trail, not because I feared it, but because I knew it did not need me to remember. The mountains keep their own memory. Every winter, snow falls the same way it did that year, covering tracks, swallowing sound, reminding anyone who dares cross too late that nature does not forgive ignorance. Survival taught me this. Living is not the same as being spared. Those who died on the trail rest where winter claimed them. Those of us who lived carried them forward, inside us, every step afterward. I tell this story not to horrify, but to warn, because somewhere, every year, someone believes the map more than the mountain. Someone trusts a shortcut. Someone thinks determination is enough. And winter is always listening.
Years after the winter that nearly erased us, I met a young man who wanted to cross the Sierra late in the season. He had strong arms, a confident smile, and the same hunger for westward promise I once carried. He asked me for advice, as if it were just another tool to pack beside his rifle and bedroll. I studied his face for a long moment. "You can't outrun winter," I told him, "and you can't reason with it." He laughed politely. Most men do when they think they're different. I did not raise my voice. I did not tell him everything. Some truths must be earned, and some arrive too late no matter how loudly they're spoken. The Donner Trail had already faded into legend by then, its name spoken carefully, as if saying it too loudly might invite something back. Surveyors marked safer routes, settlers learned to fear October skies, maps grew more honest. But the mountain itself never changed. The Sierra Nevada stands the same now as it did that year, patient, towering, indifferent. Snow still falls early when it chooses, storms still erase paths and hours, and men still believe they are stronger than nature, right up until the moment they aren't. I carry the memory of that winter like a second spine, supporting me, bending me, reminding me how fragile I am. Every decision I make runs through that filter. Is this worth the cost? Survival taught me restraint. In the years after, I visited families of those who didn't make it. Some welcomed me, some couldn't bear to look at me. I understood both. One mother pressed her son's pocket knife into my hand. "He carried this until the end," she said. "I want you to have it." I still do. It rests in a drawer beside my bed. I have never used it. I never will. History tried to reduce us to a single word: cannibals. It was easier than facing the truth, that ordinary people, placed in extraordinary cruelty, will do what is required to live. I do not ask forgiveness for surviving, but I carry responsibility. Responsibility to remember,
responsibility to speak when others romanticize the frontier, responsibility to tell the truth without spectacle. The deadliest trail in America was not deadly because of savagery, but because of overconfidence, because of bad information, because of a belief that land could be mastered rather than respected. Every winter, when snow falls quietly outside my window, I stop whatever I am doing and listen. Snow sounds gentle when it begins. It always does. That is how it fooled us.
By the time the final rescue party climbed into the mountains, winter had loosened its grip, but not its cruelty. Spring does not arrive all at once in the Sierra Nevada. It comes in fragments, a softer wind, a patch of exposed earth, water running beneath ice that still looks solid enough to kill you. The men who went back for the last survivors did so knowing what waited for them. What they found was worse. Only a handful remained at the cabins by the lake. Those still alive moved like shadows, thin and slow, as if gravity itself had grown heavier. They had stopped hoping for rescue. Hope requires energy. They had none left. One man lay beside the fire, unable to rise. He whispered, "I knew you'd come," as if speaking to ghosts. A woman refused to leave the cabin where her children had died. She sat wrapped in blankets, staring at the hearth, rocking slightly. It took hours to convince her to stand. Outside, the snow had melted enough to reveal the truth winter had hidden. Bones, not scattered, not careless, arranged. The rescuers did not touch them. They marked the places and moved on. Some things are not meant to be disturbed. The last survivors were carried out on makeshift litters. They weighed almost nothing. Their breaths were shallow, fragile, like candles burning low in a draft. When they reached the valley below, people gathered to stare. Some offered blankets and food. Others turned away, disgusted. A few crossed themselves, as if survival itself were a sin. I stood among the crowd and said nothing. What could I say that would matter? The final count was taken that summer. Nearly half of us were gone. Mothers, fathers, children who had never seen the ocean they were promised. America learned our story the way it learns most lessons, through tragedy. The Donner Trail disappeared from maps. Warnings spread. Winter crossings became rarer. The trail claimed fewer lives, though it never truly stopped claiming. As for me, I left the mountains behind in distance, but not in spirit. I sometimes imagine the moment the last snow melted that year, how the lake breathed again, how the ground warmed, how silence replaced suffering. The mountain did not mourn us, it simply continued. That knowledge hurts and comforts me at the same time, because it means our pain mattered to us, even if the world moved on. I tell this story so the dead are not just numbers, so their names are carried forward, even if only in breath and sound. The Donner Trail is not cursed, it is honest, and honesty, in the end, is the harshest survival lesson of all. The Sierra Nevada had finished with us, but America was just beginning to learn. Our story, the Donner Party, the white silence, the hunger and despair, spread slowly at first. Travelers passing through small towns whispered our names with a mixture of fear and fascination.
Newspapers printed accounts, often incomplete, sometimes exaggerated. Some called it horror, others called it cautionary. Few understood the weight of survival. I lived long enough to watch the impact. Families planning to cross westward now waited longer. Wagons were better prepared. Guides familiar with the mountains replaced the hopeful optimism of the naive. Maps became more than ink and paper. They were warnings, etched with experience and blood. I still remember one traveler who sought me out years later, young, full of hope like I once was. He wanted advice, a shortcut across the Sierra. I looked him in the eye and said only one thing: the mountain does not care what you believe. Respect it, or it will remind you that you are small. He did not ask another question. He did not need to. We became part of a larger story, the story of America learning the limits of ambition, the cost of underestimating nature. Settlements grew safer. Winter crossings became rarer. The lessons of our suffering were written into law, into guides, into the very culture of the West. But the mountain remembered, and so did I. I sometimes returned in memory to the cabins buried in snow. I walked the trail with eyes closed, listening for the wind, imagining the creak of collapsing roofs and the soft moans of the dying. Each detail is etched permanently, sharper than any ink, heavier than any burden. In telling our story, I found purpose. People needed to know that survival is more than endurance. It is understanding. It is listening to the land, respecting limits, and acknowledging mortality. I also told our story for those who could not speak for themselves. Mothers, fathers, children who were never carried out of the snow. They needed remembrance, not judgment. History tends to sanitize tragedy. It prefers heroes or villains. But life, true survival, is never so simple. It is gray, messy, and morally complex. The Donner Trail was a crucible. It revealed what we were capable of under impossible conditions: courage, endurance, love, desperation, and yes, acts no one would ever admit to publicly. America remembers the crossing as a warning, but it also remembers the resilience. Those who lived became witnesses, guardians of a lesson few others could survive to learn. And the mountain, it still stands, still waits, still challenges every traveler who dares underestimate it. I have come to believe that stories like ours are necessary, not just to preserve memory, but to teach humility, to remind a nation built on ambition that some forces cannot be conquered, only respected. And so I speak, not for fame, not for horror, but because if the deadliest trail in America can teach one traveler, one family, one generation to pause and respect the land, then perhaps our suffering was not in vain.
Surviving the Donner Trail did not feel like winning. It felt like inheriting a debt. Even years later, I woke to shadows in my room, echoes of screams, whispers of hunger. I could smell the smoke of the cabins, feel the bite of frost against my face, and hear the snow pressing down on our makeshift shelters, all while lying in a warm bed in a house full of food. The contrast was unbearable. People around me moved on with life. They married, raised children, built cities, and forgot the terror of winter's grip. I could not forget. Every feast, every laughter, every complaint of trivial discomforts gnawed at me like a secret they didn't know I carried. I carried it for all of us, the living and the dead. Guilt is a patient shadow. It does not ask permission. It creeps in silently, grows roots, and shapes every decision. I asked myself constantly, why did I survive when so many did not? Did I take too much? Did I make the wrong choices? The faces of those who didn't make it haunted my dreams. Samuel, little Patrick, Margaret's children, their eyes followed me. I could hear the crackle of the fire in the cabins, the wind screaming through the broken roofs, the groan of wood under the weight of snow. I could never walk away from that sound. I tried to bury it. I worked the land, built homes, and engaged with communities, but the Sierra always returned in memory, unbidden and relentless. The smell of burnt wood, the sound of ice cracking underfoot, the taste of boiled leather and ash. They were souvenirs I never asked for, gifts from the mountain no one else could understand. Some nights the hunger returned, not the physical hunger, but the one in the bones that refuses to be fed. It reminded me of my weakness, my desperation, and the moral lines I had crossed to survive. I did not speak of it. Few could understand, and those who did, well, their eyes told me they wished they couldn't. Even when I married again, when I tried to reclaim the ordinary life I had once dreamed of, the shadows persisted. I could not forget the silence of the snow-covered cabins, the emptiness of a table where a child should have sat, the quiet determination of people doing the unthinkable just to remain alive. I thought at times that perhaps the mountain had claimed part of my soul, not physically, of course, but something deeper, a vigilance, a wariness, an inability to trust that warmth and safety would last, that every white horizon might hide danger, and every storm could erase everything you had fought for. I have spent decades telling the story, to warn, to educate, to honor the dead, to remind the living that nature does not negotiate, and that the human spirit, though remarkable, is fragile. And yet, in telling it, I relive it. Each retelling brings back the frost, the smoke, the hunger, and the silent moral weight of survival. The mountain has never released me. Some nights I stare out at distant hills, imagining snow falling silently on a trail I once walked. I imagine the cabins buried beneath ice, the fires extinguished, the children frozen in their blankets, and I whisper a promise I do not know I can keep. I will not forget. I will carry this memory for all of us. Because someone has to. Because if the Donner Party is remembered only as horror, only as a cautionary tale of human depravity, the lessons will be lost. The courage, the endurance, the love, and yes, the desperation that kept some of us alive must also be remembered. And so, I continue to speak, even if the shadows follow, even if the memories remain vivid and unyielding, even if my voice shakes, because survival is not just living, it is remembering, bearing witness, and passing forward what the mountain and the snow taught us.
I have walked out of the Donner Trail. I am still walking every day, carrying it with me. When I finally descended from the mountains that winter, I felt lighter in body, but heavier in soul. Every step was a mixture of relief and grief. Relief that I was alive. Grief for everyone left behind. The families, the children, the men who tried to save them, and the ones who could not endure another sunrise. California spread before me like a promise I no longer trusted. Green hills rolled toward the horizon. Sunlight poured down as if nothing had happened, and birds sang without fear of frost. I wanted to rejoice, to run into the warm air, but I could not. Every color, every sound reminded me of what we had endured, what we had lost. The rescuers called it heroism. Newspapers sensationalized it. But heroism is not measured by survival. It is measured by the choices you make when everything else is stripped away. And we had made choices that few could understand or forgive. I do not speak lightly of those decisions. Hunger forces a reckoning that civilization will never prepare you for. It strips you of innocence, leaves your moral compass spinning, and demands you answer one relentless question. Do you survive, or do you die with them? I survived. That is both my blessing and my curse. In the years that followed, I rebuilt my life. I married again. I worked the land. I saw children grow and towns expand. I tried to forget, but the Donner Trail is not a memory you leave behind. It is a part of you, living under your skin, pressing down with every gust of winter wind, whispering through the cracks of every quiet night. I return to it often in my mind. I walk the snow-covered trail. I hear the wind through broken cabins. I see the faces of those I could not save. And yet I tell the story, not to shock, not to terrify, but to teach. To remind others that ambition without respect for nature can be fatal, that shortcuts can lead to the edge of death, that survival is never simple, never clean, and always comes with cost. The mountain remains. The snow continues to fall each winter. It has claimed others since our crossing, and it will claim more in the years to come. It is patient, indifferent, eternal, and it is honest. I speak of this now so that anyone who hears may remember the truth. Nature is not to be conquered, it is to be respected. And the lessons learned in desperation, in hunger, in the white silence of the Donner Trail are truths that echo beyond time. I survived America's deadliest trail, but survival alone is not the story. The story is what we endured, what we lost, and how we carried it forward. The snow may have buried the cabins, but it cannot bury the human spirit. I am a witness. I am a voice, and I will carry this memory as long as I breathe. Because to live after the Donner Trail is to carry both life and death within you, and to remember is the only way to honor those who did not.